Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of SOAL Night Live, daytime edition. Today, my special guest is Roger Joseph Manning Jr., who you may remember from a fantastic 90s band called Jellyfish. Or maybe more recently, you've seen him on the road with Beck. Not Jeff Beck, Beck. That one, that's right. So without further ado, Roger, welcome. Good to see you today.
Thanks for having me. Good morning to everybody.
It's our pleasure. Well, let me get the ball rolling here. How have you been doing during this unusual time? And what's your average day like at the moment?
Well, other than the expected sorrow and depression that comes with news of the world, my day-to-day has not changed almost at all. A typical day for me, if I'm not traveling on the road with Beck, is that I'm home working away in my bat cave here, as you can see with some of my toys behind me. And I just spend a lot of time tending to whatever it is I need to tend to, whether that's playing on a client's project or working on future Lickerish Quartet music or solo music, and everything in between. And then trying to run around and procure sustenance like everybody else. So I'm very thankful for that. I've been able to keep not only creatively fulfilled and active musically, but there's still bills to pay, as we're all painfully aware.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have a number of friends that spend a lot of time in the studio, and I mentioned to them, I said, what are the odds that somebody who come to you go, what if you had 2 months to spend on your music exclusively? Most people will be like, well, I can't quit my job and do that. Well, here we are. So, for some of us, it's business as usual, thankfully. So I'm glad to hear that you're managing to do what you do without too much interruption.
Well, and actually on that note, I've a lot of the work that I have had in the last 2 months has come from fans, long distance acquaintances, and they're doing just that. I literally am getting back to my bands or my solo project I've been working on for the last 3 years. It's time to wrap it up. It needs some keyboards. It needs some background vocals. Are you free? Are you available? Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, most of the stuff I've done have been personal projects like that.
Well, that's awesome. And I noticed that you guys have an offer on your website now too, where there's different levels and different things that you can do. You guys will actually record a song, if that's what people would like to do. And can you tell us a little bit about that? There's like different levels. It's like you can really do the whole hog, or you can just get a little jingle, or
yeah, I mean, it's not only music. There's all kinds of fan experiences, engagements at our website, thelickerishquartet.com, if I'm not mistaken. But there are some musical interactions. So it's everything from get us to play or sing on your project. Again, either one song or a batch of material. And then there's an aspect of us co-writing with somebody. Now that's limited to basically getting an idea, a scratch idea down. We certainly can have discussions about producing material for people from the ground up, but that's a whole other level of time and financial investment. But yeah, sing people a birthday song for their girlfriends. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we can put together. And I certainly had fun doing that on my solo campaign for my glamping EP back in 2018. So yeah, it's those were fun, and now we've kind of even expanded it more, and you get Tim and Eric are involved as well.
That's awesome. Okay, folks, we'll definitely check out their website and take advantage of those offers, because it's a once in a lifetime thing, I think. All right, well, usually we talk about our earliest musical memories on the show. I was wondering, what are some of the first records that you fell in love with before you even could go buy your own? Things you heard around the house?
Yeah, I mean, before I could go buy my own, my parents' record collection was surprisingly limited as I went on to discover what other people had sitting around their house. We had maybe 1 or 2 Beatles records, and they weren't even the cool ones. They were the super early ones, which are also great. But I love when the Beatles kind of helped invent prog and Psych and all that stuff. And I think the hippest thing my dad had in the house was a Creedence album, which I was Cosmo's Factory, which I love to death. Plenty of Simon and Garfunkel, Dionne Warwick. So I had lots of melody, thankfully. I loved all Carpenters. I loved all those records because basically, well, that was an era of music, whether it was top 40 radio or, the underground, which was harmonically rich, melodically rich. Everything could actually be construed as progressive then compared to pop fare now and what popular music evolved in the decades ahead. So I was thankful for those moments.
They may not have been hip, but they taught you a lot about production, melody.
Oh God, yes.
Harmony. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the early boy bands, the Monkees. I mean, they were incredibly intricate, sophisticated for, again, teeny bopper music, if you will. And I, still enjoy even their records to this day.
Yeah, I used to love watching.
I just thought of something that if I don't say it now, I'll forget. And the Monkees brought it up. Were you an Adam Schlesinger fan?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely followed his career trajectory. He had a group actually that I think was probably less known than most of the stuff he had success with. They were called Ivy.
Yeah.
And they were very much had an incredible like British influence sound, very moody, jangly guitar, which I love. That was probably my favorite thing he did. Yeah, it was such a surprise to see him exit early, so to speak, graduate, and
killed me. Absolutely killed me.
Yeah, and we're all roughly the same age, and I was like, whoa, reality check.
Yeah.
What's a few records that you bought once you had your own cash and ability to go get them?
Well, I'm revealing my age here. Kiss Alive 1 was the first album I spent my own money on.
That's
I
awesome.
couldn't get enough of it. Posters all over the walls and mom and dad freaking out. And then, which this kind of is very exemplary of my future in music and the diverse styles I've enjoyed expressing myself in. But my second record was Beach Boys' Endless Summer, the double record set of their, like a greatest hits, if you will. But and then I discovered that the Columbia House Record Club existed.
There you go. Right. Did we all?
Well, and the funny story there was, of course, I was like, wait, you mean I can get more than one Kiss record? So, but thankfully, as a twist of fate, the universe looking out for us, Columbia House completely screwed up my order. So I ended up getting one or two Kiss records, and then my mom had ordered Chicago's Greatest Hits, and I was like, well, that's cool because I know some of those songs, and I'm okay with Chicago. It'll make my mom happy. She gave me the $1.50 to join the record club, and they screwed up. They didn't give me half my Kiss records and sent a bunch of Chicago albums that we didn't even order.
Oh.
And it didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me. It's like, no, now you can box those back up, send them back to the company, and please correct this. I was like, well, I guess I'm stuck with these. So there was like Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life in there. I'm trying to remember what else. There's probably like Kansas Monolith or something, because either then or later, because I've got a bunch of Kansas albums at that time. But what happened was I got into a bunch of Chicago deep cuts that I didn't know other than the hits. I mean, why would I? And then I discovered, if you guys remember a store, I don't know if they were international, but in all the malls, they had a store called Musicland.
Oh, yeah.
And had records and tapes up front, right? They just bombard you with what's on the top 10. But if you wandered way into the back of the store, they had all the obscure records I would see these Roger Dean album covers and stuff. Like, what the hell is this? Blue Oyster Cult album covers. There's something weird going on here. I don't know what it is. But they had the sheet music to everything. I mean, it was just like sheet music to Kiss, Chicago, whatever. And I bought a bunch of the Chicago sheet music because I could read, having taken piano lessons. And next thing I knew, I was like stumbling along with the albums. And that's how I taught myself chords, because traditional piano lessons don't teach you chords and harmony. They just teach you to read, which is great, but it's not gonna get you to jam in the band in the garage with your friends, and have all the girls hanging out outside. That wasn't going to happen if you were learning classical music and reading. So those accidental Chicago records were huge for me in making my ear more sophisticated and hearing new and interesting harmonies and all the arrangements they were doing with not only brass, of course, but with lots of synthesizers and things like that. So it was very much Chicago in a weird way. You know, them, Steely Dan, the Totos of the world, they were like a backdoor into the prog that would eventually inspire me and part of what I do.
Excellent. I didn't think I could love you anymore, but I do. He just said Toto and Steely Dan. That's my number 1 and number 3 bands of all time. So yeah, we're good.
Yeah, they're on my short list too, definitely. In Chicago, I remember my older brother brought home Chicago 2 when it was new. So it's like that's like my record I heard around the house before I could buy one.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. There's something about a horn section that just appealed to me instantly. I was like 3 years old, putting that record on the record player, putting on the giant headphones, and there's nothing I would rather do. It was great.
We're back to that same age difference issue, because I love Chicago too, but I love the David Foster, Peter Cetera, early
big
80s
difference.
stuff.
Yes.
Big difference. Also great though, I think.
Well, for 80s pop, that stuff's pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's some of Foster's best work, because he's been known to flirt with the devil, but he also gave us some incredible stuff.
That's true. Well, he has a way of grabbing a band and doing his way with them. And sometimes the results are nice, and sometimes it's like, oh man, what are you guys doing? It's like, I know he's popular, but come on. All right. So any notable concerts you remember going to back in your teens or early 20s? Anything that pops out in your mind now?
Well, my parents, well, I was the eldest of 3 boys. So they were the most protective and cautionary with me. And so it all bets were off. No going to see Kiss shows with the older kids. That was just too dangerous. They weren't okay with that. So no, it was pretty just milquetoast and suburban and safe. My first real concert was Chicago at the Oakland Coliseum, because my mom accompanied me, and I think she almost fainted when our seats were next to this young couple who were making out and smoking weed the whole time. And of course, I was more interested in I was 11, maybe 10 or 11. Yeah. And I was more interested in what those two were up to than what was actually my heroes were up on stage. I was like,
sure.
This is a little more interesting.
So was that like 70? Great. Was that 77-ish? Did they still have Terry?
So check this out. This is very creepy. It was for Chicago 11. And yes, they still had Terry. It was the original band. What I didn't know was after that concert in San Francisco, that was the end of that tour for them. They were on a big, like 3 or 4 month break. They all went home to LA, and that's when Terry died.
Wow.
So
you saw the very last show?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And my friend and I discovered that in the newspaper when Terry died several months later. My friend pointed that out to me. He goes, "You saw their last show?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is just too weird." We were already nauseous that this hero of ours, had passed away. We were too little when Hendrix and Jim Morrison and stuff passed away. So that was very weird and creepy. And then I went and saw a Bee Gees concert, which they were the biggest thing on the planet. But all the Bill Graham had those incredible Day on the Green concerts. If you guys are familiar with those, growing up in the 70s, right? He'd get like Oakland Coliseum, sports arena, and he'd fill it with Zeppelin would headline, and then there'd be 48 groups on that bill, and it was a full day concert. That was early festival, is what it was. Mm-hmm. I couldn't go to any of those. Wasn't allowed to. Aerosmith. My favorite bands was the Aerosmith, Zeppelin, all the fun, intricate, kind of classic rock of the day. Heart, Kansas. Occasionally, the Brits would come to town, but they would be at like Winterland. They wouldn't be on these big festivals because while they were popular, they weren't as popular as the other stuff. But all of it was great. All of it I looked up to. And didn't get to see any of it. And, when I was finally able to go see whatever I wanted to see, it was the early 80s, and a lot of great music then too, but I'd missed some of those heroes in their heyday.
I know the feeling. You know, it's tough to go, hey, you know I'm only 8, but you got to drive me to Kansas City to see Yes tonight, Mom and Dad.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, right. Kansas City, oh, that big city. What would happen to us if we went there? You know, it'd run us off the road. Yeah. So, who were some of your main keyboard influences early on?
Well, you know, when you're super little, it's sometimes you're just hearing the sound coming at you. You don't know if a trumpet's doing it, a synthesizer's doing it, or an affected guitar is doing it. You're just hearing the sound, and you're either vibing with it or you're not. And so I would take my classical lessons, and when I'd be in the waiting area where the other student was in front of me, my teacher, who was a super sweet, but square old kind of classical teacher, cliche, stereotype. But she had a stack of keyboard magazines sitting in her living room.
Nice.
I would leaf through them and I'd see everybody on the cover, from Wakeman to Steve Porcaro to Robert Lamb to Carey and Steve Walsh. They're all on the cover and they're all playing stuff that has a keyboard with a bunch of knobs and dials. I'm like, what's that? How is this? This, whatever they're doing is not what I'm doing. I got to figure out what's going on. But it would be years before I would actually find those records, sink my teeth into them, understand what an electric piano sounded like versus a synthesizer, blah, blah, blah. And so my heroes at the time were all those people. It wasn't until, and even folks like Gary Newman and stuff that was overtly synthesized, Kraftwerk, that was like, what's going on here? Not even understanding Kraftwerk's early krautrock German Prog era. Like that's a whole scene unto itself, as you guys are very aware. And so it wasn't until the 80s when I just, young in high school, freshman, 8th grade, that's when I really started finding out what's going on, and just this whole gigantic world of inspiration opens up to me. And it literally was coming from anywhere. It was coming from, Tony Banks and all the classic Prog contemporaries of his, to all the fusion jazz rock heroes, and then even the legit jazz guys, and all the incredible synth pop that's coming out of Britain at the time. It's just a kid in the candy store of keyboard freak out. Drum machines are being invented, samplers are being invented. My mind is being blown.
Late 70s, early 80s was a good time to be a keyboard fan.
Oh my God. And it was, I in junior high, like, there was no problem with the girls. Girls were slipping me notes. I think you're kind of cute. Blah, blah. For some reason, I hit puberty. Things change. Now I'm in high school. The notes stop. They're looking at the football players. I'm not getting the attention anymore that I took for granted. And it kind of ends up being a mixed blessing, because I'm just like, oh, well, screw you. I'm going to be over here. And I just go into music like 1,000 miles an hour. And I'm drumming in a punk band, and I'm playing piano in a jazz trio. And I'm going to Berkeley with $20 in my pocket. My friends and I are buying dollar vinyl just by the pounds. And the only reason we're buying it is we're going, look, this guy, Steve Gadd, plays on all these other records, and we're just buying them because he's on it, or Simon Phillips, or Steve Morse, Dregs. It was just like all these guys, and they're playing like it's kind of jazz, but it's kind of rock, and they seem younger, but they seem to know the old, legit jazzers, like the cool hip guys we need to discover. But it was just incredible. I mean, I have such fond memories of that period, because I thought music was always going to be like that. I just thought pop music, pop music was going to. We were even enjoying Madonna because she was hiring these crazy kind of funk experimental disco people.
Not now Rogers and his team.
Yeah, exactly. So while you got these very catchy, fun dance pop melodies, we were enjoying these very thought out, intricate backing tracks that were, almost all keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very, very exciting time. And I can remember, I'll let you ask your next question, or I'll just babble for the next 30 minutes.
Okay. All right. Let me see. So some people don't mention much, but you play quite a bit of guitar. So tell me a bit about, like how far back that goes, and what are some of your favorites? It seems like every time I see an old video, you're always playing 335 or something in that ballpark. Is that kind of your favorite kind of acts?
Well, so I attempted to teach, again, I grew up thinking everybody specializes on their instrument. I'm already specializing on keyboard. I'd grown up playing drums as well, but there were so many incredible drummers, and keyboards really excited me. So I'm like, I'm just focusing on the keyboard. And then why wouldn't I want to? Because again, samplers, synthesizers, you can do anything you want on keyboards. Guitar, I'm interested in. In fact, I'm very interested in, inspired by a lot of guitar players. But it seemed like I put my hand on there. My hand's so little, I'm just like buzzing strings. So I was like, well, this is frustrating. I can go over to the piano. There's no buzzing. I just hit it and it works. I just hit the drums and they work. There's no buzzing. So I let my friends specialize in that. Now, I did attempt to learn my bar chords, which I did for the most part, but I never memorized the fretboard. So come the Jellyfish days, it was very clear that we had songs that were more guitar heavy than others. And Jason Faulkner gave me a crash course in what I needed to do. And I got a little bit of my chops up. And I actually really, really enjoy, and have to this day written some of my favorite songs on guitar, because I kind of have one hand tied behind my back kind of thing. And a different part of your songwriting brain kind of comes into play when you can't just grab whatever intricate jazz chord you want. You're kind of like, oh, if I just pluck out the bass note, I can hear what the song's going to be, blah, blah, blah. So the only reason I was playing that 335 is because it belonged to Jason. I didn't own my own guitar at the time. I graduated into a Gibson Firebird, which is still one of my favorite guitars for those people who care. But that's why you see the 335 in so many of the footage.
I see a little 12 string in there from time to time as well.
Sure, I actually had up until recently a 12 string 335 actually.
Wow.
That's so okay.
I love 12 strings. I mean, who doesn't?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Jason's another phenomenal talent, man. TVI.
Oh yeah,
great stuff too, man.
Thank you. Yes, we had fun with that project, and it was we both grew up in these very wholesome kind of California suburbs. He was in Southern California. I was in Northern California. He put an ad in the trade paper, which was basically the Craigslist of the day at the time. It was called The Recycler, and that's where all the bands would look for like-minded players. And I'll never forget his ad, because I would comb the ads every week. It would come out, and I just get frustrated. I'm not into the same stuff any of these other people are. And then I saw his ad, and it said, influenced by XTC, Bowie, Blue Nile, and Joe Jackson, I think.
Wow.
And I was like, damn, who's this freak?
Right. It's like, grab the phone.
Grab the phone. We met up like 3 days later, and basically we stayed in touch. I was very full speed ahead in college, and he might have even been playing the 3 o'clock at the time, or anyway, the timing wasn't right for us to try to find something to work on. So we just stayed in touch. And it literally was not until Jellyfish started to take off, and was like, oof, we better get a guitar player in place. And we couldn't find a good guitar player that met our needs up in the Bay Area. I said, well, I know this guy in LA. I don't know what he's doing. Haven't talked to him for about 9 months, but I'll call him up, and that's how it all happened.
I can imagine. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it true that the solo on She Still Loves Him is the way it sounds because he was angry at Andy at the time? I think I heard that a long time ago.
I don't know about that specific detail. Let's just say anyone who's made a record of their own music, no matter who you are in the band or what you're contributing to the band, it's a challenging, emotional, social process for anybody. I'm sure your Uncle Kerry has many, many stories.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's such an angry, aggressive sounding solo that I don't know where I heard that. I don't but
well, I think
that's
to
always
Jason,
what I pictured in my head.
Yeah, hey, regardless of where Jason channeled that energy, I think he saw, and we all appreciated, he was like, this is a fairly moody, beautiful, kind of slow tempo song. And I think he saw an opportunity to inject some angularity, some tension, and he ran with it. Yeah. Thankfully.
Yes. Sorry, Sean, go ahead, man. I keep derailing you.
Hey, that's no problem. A lot of people are I've seen a few questions where people are wondering if Jason was ever considered to be part of Lickerish, and I figure you guys are in Beck together, so he knew that you're doing this. And was it ever a consideration to make it like a 4-piece with him? Or
No, it wasn't. I mean, we didn't ask my brother or Andy for that matter. This Lickerish Quartet started as a idea I had to simply get together with Tim Smith and to write. We had briefly worked on his band, the Umajets, way back in 1995. Eric and I had come out to Atlanta, did some playing, and then I actually co-produced some songs, did some writing with Tim. Anyway, that was it was a tease because it was very successful for him and his partner, Rob, but it was very short-lived. And then 20 years flew by as we're all involved in whatever we're involved in. And when 2017 came around, I was just saddened by the fact that time was moving by so fast and I hadn't worked with him in any way. So I reached out to him. And he loved the idea of trying to write long distance. Let's share files, because he was in Atlanta. And a couple weeks later, he said, hey, what would you think? You know, Eric's already out there with you in LA. What would you think of inviting him along to kind of rekindle that Umajets spirit that we had? So it was always intended to be a trio. We never considered, there's like a Jellyfish Mach 2, waiting in the wings here. It wasn't about that. It was like, let's get this together and write. See if we can dust off the cobwebs and do something that we enjoy.
Everything is new. That's one thing I wanted to ask you. Was it all created at that point, or did anybody bring anything pre-existing into the session?
We all brought stuff pre-existing.
Okay.
Now, some of those ideas somebody might have only been sitting around for the last 2 months. I had several ideas I was bringing back as far as my college days.
Wow.
Which is what I always do. I've got a stockpile of ideas that still kind of are poking at me, going, this one's good enough. Try to finish it.
Right.
And as you'll hear from the upcoming 2 EPs, my contributions are all over the map. Some I wrote last year, some I mean 3 or 4 years ago, and some are from my history over the years. So that's what that was about. And once we had solid ideas in place, we all kind of understood that our good friend Jeremy Stacy, who's a brilliant session drummer, that he would be the perfect he had the pop sensibilities to play on this. And Tim had worked in the Finn Brothers reunion with Jeremy.
Nice.
And Carol came together. Yeah. So he was a very logical, and he'd already said, if you guys are ever working on something, I'll fly out to LA in a second, and I won't charge you my normal rate, and blah, blah, blah. So the whole thing kind of fell together very naturally. And literally the fact that so many of our old fans, and certainly fans that have been with us since the Jellyfish days, are enjoying this music, it's appealing to them, that's a bonus. I love that. The more the merrier. But again, it was never like, well, if we just get my brother and we get Jason on a few tracks, it was just never talked about or thought about. The 3 of us were very happy and had plenty of ideas moving forward, and just kind of like, I guess this is some kind of version of Crosby, Stills and Nash, who all came from their own previous projects. And no lead singer, meaning everybody kind of contributed. And we
all 3 of your voices are so cool and so unique. I love the fact that you share it all. It's great.
Thank you. Yeah,
I have to stroke you for 1 second. I got to tell you, I heard 3 of your tracks for the first time this morning, and I swear to God, Roger, it is the exact same effect you get from taking a morphine pill. I mean, it's like it's like a wave of of warmth and pleasure. And I'm fangirling here for a second, but man, this stuff is so phenomenal. If anybody's listening to this that hasn't heard it yet, and you like Jellyfish or any number of the other related projects or things that influence them, this is going to be right down your alley. It's unreal. It's really good.
Yeah, I agree, and it's different though, I mean, I wouldn't say it sounds like Jellyfish, but it has the Jellyfish genes.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very fair way of putting it.
It's definitely its own thing. But if you like Jellyfish, I think there's a lot here to love.
Oh man.
So you definitely want to check it out. So are all 3 EPs basically in the can, and you're just waiting to do them, every 6 months or?
The other two aren't quite in the can. They're very near completion. They need to be mixed. There's still some overdubs and dealing. A few overdubs need to be finalized, but yeah, they're mostly ready to go, and that's of course part of what we'll be doing in the months ahead.
Well, that was kind of your plan, was to do one EP worth like every 6 months. Is that right?
Well, I had such success releasing a 4-song EP of solo material in 2018, meaning it was just the right amount of new material after the public hadn't heard from me for a while, to kind of get back into my world and to re-release some of my old solo stuff and just kind of remind everybody I was still alive and creating. And so I like that kind of concept, because what I didn't want to happen was, and we all agreed, we didn't want to give everybody a batch of material and then we disappear for another 3 or 5 years, because that just seems to be how life is. Because this isn't our one and only source of livelihood. So yeah, the kind of 4 or 5 song EP concept really works for me and us as a collective.
How would you compare the other 2 EPs to this one? I mean, what kind of wonders await us?
We certainly explore lots of different territory. The way these songs, we enjoy the pantheon, the arena of pop stylings that have come to us via our predecessors over the years, and you get inspired by different things. And that's one of the things I enjoyed about a Beatles record, about a 10cc album, about all the evolutions Yes took in their trajectory, and within a very short time period. And I personally bore quite easily, so I'm always pushing myself.
You're not alone.
Anyway, yeah. So and again, I grew up with the Todd Rundgrens of the world. I mean, look at the territory he's covered.
Love Todd.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, it's naturally what kind of has come out from me over the years and what I've done with my collaborators. And so I think people will be pleasantly surprised and maybe even slightly challenged, but we're never gonna
challenge us.
The fans are never gonna be without that rich melodic content that hopefully they can't get out of their ears. You mentioned the morphine hit a second ago. I learned very, very early on that while drugs were fun, if I did music right, they were never as fun as music.
So true.
So if I'm not literally, I've got my finger on the IV drip as I'm working on a song. If I'm not sufficiently,
dosed,
getting myself dosed, then how can I expect the fan to?
Right.
So these are kind of the checklist of standards that we all hold ourselves to in anything we've ever done. And so nothing can make me happier when a fan has that reaction and goes, hey, I can relate.
Absolutely.
Oh, love it. It's like so much ear candy. I just love the way you have all the vintage sounds and just so much attention to detail. It's like it harkens back to those wonderful pop records from the 70s that we all grew up on. Well, maybe not Jake, but that's okay. Less wrinkles for you.
No, but I was going to mention there's like, for me, something exactly like this is what I'm talking about with that little hit of morphine. I like I said, I've heard all these songs so recently, they're all just a mash together to me. But there's one where you do a little hit of almost like an anvil, and it's just out of nowhere. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not kidding.
I'm actually trying to remember what moment that might be.
It's a little ting, and it fades out so brilliantly, and it was just like, wow.
That's bad. I think you're talking about There Is a Magic Number.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love all the songs, but I think that one's my favorite. It's just such a
is that
stepping into the 80s, but yet into a place that you were never in the 80s. I don't even have a describe it. I just love that stuff.
That's a good way to put it. Who's on lead vocals on that? Is that Tim?
Yeah, Tim is on lead vocal. That's a song that started with an unfinished idea that he brought to Eric and I. We just started sculpting, throwing stuff at it.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Do we figure out what the number is? Does it say that in the lyrics?
I don't think that's revealed. To each his own.
That's right. Okay. So tell us, is fadoodle a noun or a verb? Or,
Oh, I guess it's both.
It could go either way, right?
Yeah.
We were just discussing before we got you on about fadoodling as parents in this quarantine time. It's become very challenging. My children never leave ever, so
you have to get more inventive.
That's right. We have to.
Yeah, but I could see your target audience for that one. It's like, all right, I've done my honey-do list. The kids are gone. Come on. You know, so that's great. Okay. Well, tell us about Bluebirds Blues. How did that one come about, and who had the germ of the idea for that one?
The germ of that came from me, and that was one of the songs that is literally back from, I think I had just graduated from college. I'd moved to San Francisco, and I was playing keyboards in the pre-Jellyfish band that Andy was a part of with another gentleman. And I was very lonely away from my friends, away from family, and it's kind of like, you know, little kid in the big city trying to make a name for himself. And thankfully I had my friend and writing partner, Andy, at the time, but there was a lot of solitude in the closet that I was renting in the Mission District, living hand to mouth, and you know, the whole struggling artist romantic fairy tale. But I would just try to stay grounded by writing as much as possible, and just there were no bad ideas. I just throw them all on cassette and listen later to whether or not I'm being moved. And so yeah, both those that song came from kernel of an idea I had, and there was never room on any Jellyfish albums for it. Didn't make it on my solo records, and I said, damn, I still believe in this idea. I'll play it for Eric and Tim. And they came up with a lot of those very ornamented, flowery guitar parts almost instantly, which was great because I had written the song on guitar clumsily. And then we just started to flush it out. So, you know, you basically show up every day and you go, all right, what have we got that we like? What's the song missing? Well, it doesn't have a bridge yet. Well, let's put our heads together and let's jam through some ideas, or what could it possibly be like? And you sit around and you philosophize. So I've never had any great success jamming an idea out where, you turn on all the instruments and you guys go for it. Whether it's me or the people I've worked with, that's never yielded much. I've actually written more ideas just taking my evening hike, and you're kind of got the earworm going around in your head, right? Halfway through the walk, you're like, oh, it should go to something like this. I can almost hear the interval change. And then you rush home and you get in front of the keyboard or guitar and you're like, is this what I was hearing? Because you have clarity when you're not distracted and you're just kind of zenning out. Andy used to call it self-hypnosis, particularly when he was writing lyrics. And I think that's absolutely been the case for me. A lot of people also derive great results writing when they're depressed or very, very sad or heartbroken, of course.
Yeah.
Now, while I absolutely experience those emotions, my greatest successful songs have been when I'm happy, when everything is going my way, don't have a care in the world, because I feel it's almost like the burden of life has temporarily been lifted and I'm just free. And when I'm free and non-distracted and I'm not editing and I'm not self-conscious, the idea is they're just pouring out, right? So my biggest challenge is to try to capture those gems and make sure they don't fly away into the ether, and use them ideally sooner than later. Hopefully you don't have to wait 20 years. But in the case of Bluebird, that's an idea that's 25 years old. But thankfully I had my teammates there to help me flesh it out.
Well, that's awesome. It reminds me almost like of a late 70s sort of pop tune, like you might have got from Seals and Crofts or somebody in that ballpark.
Yeah. I worship those guys, Joni Mitchell. There's so much of that California singer-songwriter early 70s sound. It's just in my blood. It's how I was raised, and at the same time, early 80s South Bay, California punk hardcore scene, which very much has its own punk sound. That's as inspirational. I haven't done a lot of punk in my life, but if somebody's curious, well, what makes you up? It's like all that stuff makes us up. And a lot of my age group too, whether I'm playing with Jason or a lot of the guys in the Beck band, there's this, punk rock was everywhere at that time because we were 13, 14, 15 years old. And I kid you not, I was discovering prog and some of the, classic greats of the prog pantheon. And at the same time, a lot of British punk and American punk was all about tearing that down and dethroning that those kind of rock gods, that the Robert Plants of the world that had been put on these pedestals that were never, us pitiful little serfs were not allowed to touch the robe of the rock god, and that's fine. That was almost like a role playing fun that we had. Fantastical side to progressive rock, which I love, that this whole fantasy element. But it's important for me and what I've given back to the world to know that those worlds are 100% equally influential to me. One of my greatest joys was meeting Leonard from the Dickies, who was one of my favorite Southern California punk bands. Very much an early power pop band, if you will. Some of the most melodic, sing-along, fast punk pop you've ever heard. Well, unbeknownst to me, him and his partner Stan were incredible Jellyfish fans. They came to our show at Magic Mountain. He introduces himself afterwards. I didn't even recognize him. I find out that him and his cohorts are huge prog heads. Now they've covered, they've certainly covered some progressive Sabbath songs and stuff like that. But mad Yes fans, mad Genesis fans. I mean, like even more than me. They know every inch of those records, and yet they're like this dichotomy. And it really showed me early on. It's like, man, it's all about whatever is good. And you just take the bits, the juicy bits of all of it. And that's all I've ever tried to do.
Well said.
It shows, and it's such a tasty blend. You're like a chef that just makes the most wonderful meals.
Thank you.
Couple questions while I'm thinking about them. Did you ever cross paths with Kevin Gilbert? He was a California guy.
Well, interestingly, I did not. And he was from San Jose.
Yeah.
Where my lifelong friend and collaborator Lyle Workman is from.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he and Lyle were very well acquainted. So even though he then came to Los Angeles and was doing Toy Matinee and worked with Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club and all that stuff, by the time he had passed, I started meeting some of those people. So no, we never did. I've certainly been exposed to some of the zebra stuff he had done. I believe wasn't that
giraffe?
Yeah. Sorry, because there was also a zebra. If I'm not
okay, yeah, there was. Yeah, definitely. That was kind of his pop prog band. They even covered the Lamb at Prog Fest in like '95 or something.
That's right. With my good friend Dave Kersner is in that project.
Exactly. Yeah, I know Dave's a friend of mine as well. That's awesome. Okay, how about Jeff Buckley? You ever run across him? I always think of him and Kevin as kind of had a similar trajectory in a way, with the
I mean,
gone too soon.
Gone too soon. I think Buckley's music influenced everybody. Joe Carnes, our bass player in Imperial Drag, post Jellyfish project,
love it.
Really into Jeff and introduced me and Eric to a lot of what he gave the world.
Yeah. I have a few fan questions that have come in. Somebody wants to know how that Rod Stewart cover of Baby's Coming Back came about.
That's right. I actually have no idea how that came about.
I Want to Stay Home, wasn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it was. It was I Want to Stay Home. You're right.
I actually don't. Okay. I don't remember, but it typically would come from the producer or the record company thinking this would be a good match. I'm not sure it was Rod's idea, or maybe it was. I don't know.
I heard it I heard it recently, and it's, you know, the original is far better. It wasn't a good fit for Rod, I don't think.
No.
At least maybe not that key. I don't know.
That may have been.
Yeah. Well, let's see what else I got here. So tell us a bit about Lighthouse Spaceship. You know, that's kind of like, I guess, the Prog inspired little mini epic on the EP.
Yeah, it is. That's how it ended up being. And we had no intentions when it started, like, oh, we're really gonna do a homage to our Prog heroes or anything like that. It was just like we kept adding these sections that seemed to be necessary to get us in and out of the previous one. And we figured as long as the melody led the listener, and that all made lyrical sense and had a flow to it, then we weren't going to stop ourselves. It's not like we had these rules and regulations for what a song could or couldn't become. And that's another rule that we always have, is like, allow the song to be what it wants to be. Does it want to be a 2.5 minute power pop punk flash, you know, or does it want to have this more long-winded thing? Now, the whole outro was something that when we arrived there, we were like, we've kind of closed the doors on chapter 1. Chapter 2 is begging to carry the listener off into the sunset, so to speak. Well, what's that going to sound like? We had no idea for that outro. And it was lots and lots of trial and error, everybody coming in with different ideas of how it might be. And then we finally ended up with that chord progression. And then you just start throwing ideas at it. You know, so Eric had the, yeah, go ahead.
I thought it's very Beatle-esque. It was kind of I Am the Walrus meets She's So Heavy, kind of wind out kind of thing, where it just keeps winding around. Was that were they a thought at all, or did it just turn out?
No,
like that?
in fact, for me, it was always, and I can certainly relate to what you're saying. But for me, it was always there's a song on, I'm trying to remember. There were a couple Bowie tunes in his Man Who Sold the World era that had kind of had this repetitive outro hook, and I was like, my God, if we can just do something remotely close to that, where the melody doesn't become, the chord progression doesn't become tiresome, that you want to keep floating in it for a while, and that's only going to work with a certain combination of chords and melody. Now that whole, when you hear the song fading, and that whole kind of operatic thing happens, or with the different choirs of angelic vocals and stuff, that was Eric Dover taking the song home to work on guitar parts, and then coming back and goes, oh, I threw some vocal ideas at the end of it. We're like, wait, what? We didn't even have that meeting. And we listened to it, and we're like, and we were blown away, and we kind of didn't know what to do with it or what to make of it. And it wasn't until months later we said this would be the perfect way to exit the song, and literally the spaceship is like flying off into the sky, and it just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and disappearing. And that like little Morse code signal that you hear, that came from the mind of Eric in doing that. And
collaboration is so fun that way. I love it.
It can be. The public doesn't get to see the 10 ideas that we all fought over that got rejected and are on the cutting room floor, so to speak. But that's why you have to check your ego at the door, and you also have to trust each other to have that singular vision of what greatness is going to look like and what you're striving for.
Well, I think you released that, you had no idea any of this stuff was going to happen, but the timing was great to really brighten the day for a lot of us during a really difficult week. And lyrically, it's like, if you're having a hard time, hang on, is kind of the message. And I think that was the perfect message for the time. So it's kind of interesting how that all came together.
It's a beautiful, tragic coincidence. And the very first week that we stepped through that door with that song and kind of announcing ourselves to the world, certainly the old fans, I can't tell you how many comments we got about, this completely been, your timing couldn't be better. This is what I needed right now. I'm so depressed. This song's, reminded me to chin up, whatever it was. It was just deeply, deeply touching. And you're right, that was not planned. I mean, how could it be?
No, not at all. But it was like getting tossed a lifesaver. It's like
Yeah.
know.
No, we were hoping
Thank
to have this
thank
EP
you.
out last year.
Oh wow. Okay.
We were a year late. So there you go.
Okay.
Wow. Meant to be.
Let's see here. Jeremy Stacy, same one that's in King Crimson now, right?
That is correct.
One of the 3 drummers. Have you seen that? How they got it going?
Finally saw this collective in September of last year. They came to Los Angeles, and again, we can go off into the Crimson tangent. But not only was I hearing songs that I've known most of my life being performed by masters, conducted by the master,
Right.
I look up at intermission, and I'm literally surrounded. Everybody around me, which this never happens at a concert, even in Los Angeles. Everybody I know, as far as I can see, but 5 to 10 feet in front of me, are musicians that I know from all different walks of life. Some of whom I just worked with last week. Some of whom I haven't even seen for 5 years. And we're like, oh my God, what are you doing here? Oh my God, I didn't know you're a Crimson fan. Who's not? Oh my God. It was unbelievable. All ages, all generations. And I was like, this is really special. And I'm really grateful to be able. That was my first Crimson concert. I didn't even get to see him during the Discipline days or any of that fun stuff.
Well, from a keyboard perspective, this was the time to see them because, they hadn't trotted out anything resembling a keyboard, since the early 70s, so to just hear these luscious layers of mellotron all over the place and doing Crimson King and some of those tunes was wonderful. And I liken it almost to the King Crimson Orchestra. It's got such a rich sound and there's so many players in it now. And then the whole drum thing where they're basically playing hot potato, splitting the fills up. And it's unbelievable. People are like, you really need 3 guys to take Bill Bruford's place. And it's like, no, you don't get it. That's not what this is about.
That's not what it's about. Yeah.
This is about going new places that even Bill Bruford would appreciate, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So, and they do. So it's like, they're playing music that's 40 years old, but they approach it all as if they're brand new pieces. And it's got a vitality to it. It's it's not just some nostalgia act by any means, but wouldn't expect anything less from Fripp and company. They're never ones to rest on their laurels, and that's one of the reasons we love them. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to see that because that's one of the greatest prog shows of the last 5 years to check out, and that lineup is just amazing. Okay,
I don't want to kill the flow, but I feel like we should check in with you and make sure because we're at
how are we doing on time?
Hour in. I just want to make sure.
It's
fun to talk, but
I know. I probably should get going. Maybe a couple more questions or.
All right. Well, let me skip ahead to the fan ones. Good friend of mine asked. Well, for starters, your studio. Did you recently move these all into your house? It seems like I've seen video of you with, surrounded by boards before, but I heard you mention that this is a new studio or what?
Well, it's a new workspace on my property. We just moved into this home about 3 years ago. So between my previous home and, finding a enjoyable, comfortable workspace that meets your needs, it's affordable. Not to mention being a gear junkie like half of us, moving that collection around. It's a labor of love, to say the least. So yes, as of recently, thankfully, was able to get a situation happening here on my property, and so I do have a lot of my toys all here and set up for the first time in almost 10 years. So that's what's going on. And and it also is where I can get silent and secluded. So if I am filming stuff or doing interviews like this, I just come down here because there's no distractions.
Yeah, that's awesome. A friend of mine asked, if you were forced to only live with 5 boards, which 5 would you pick?
Definitely the clavinet.
I told him that would be on the list. I know you love that. We all love it.
Boy, do I love it. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I don't want to spend too much time thinking because there are so many. One tape machine, probably the four manual Chamberlain,
Right.
which I love the Oberheim synth. So the old Oberheim SEM, 4-voice, 8-voice, 2-voice, that era. It's one of my favorite sounding synths. I love the wavetable synths. So the PPG 2.2 is one of my favorites. Currently don't own one of those. Blah blah blah. Gosh, I don't know.
It's tough.
It's tough. I mean, the 2600.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that behind me. There are so many. Yeah, five keyboards. I don't know. It's crazy.
Is there one board that you've been just dying to have and just haven't been able to find? Like, what's at the top of your wish list?
I do really think it would be great to have either that Oberheim 4-voice with the programmer or the PPG 2.2.
Okay. Well, if any of you out there have a line on this, let us know and we will
cut me a deal. I'll feature it in the next album.
You betcha. Another reader wrote in and said, I'd love to know anything about his gorgeous song, Sandman. Can you tell us how that came about and what its inspiration was?
Right. Okay, here's a little trivia. So during the mixing phase of Spilt Milk, we were at a very nice studio with a very nice grand piano because Jack preferred to work on that mixing console. So we're literally renting out the whole facility just so he can work on the mixing console. And this giant, beautiful room with this giant, beautiful piano is going unbooked for weeks because mixing that album, as you can imagine, was a huge undertaking.
Sure.
And he needed to have his private time to do that. Well, I would come to the studio most days and just kind of check in with him. I didn't want to hang out at home. And if so inspired, I'd go sit on that piano for hours. And both the song Wish It Would Rain off my solo record and Sandman, at least the genesis of those ideas, came from that grand piano in United Studio A, which was Ocean Way A at the time, which is where Jack mixed Spilt Milk. And it was just me messing with chord progressions and it sounded mysterious and moody to me. And reminded me of some of my favorite Andy Partridge XTC moments.
Oh,
I kind of fell into that headspace. Obviously, it became a lot different than that, but that's the kind of mood that's the drug I was attempting to shoot myself up with at the time. Get a fix of.
Okay, that's awesome. I got another question here. I wish I could get Land of Pure Imagination and Catnip Dynamite on iTunes in Australia. Any chance of that happening?
I'm happy to report that this year, if all goes as planned, we're actually looking at a late summer announcement. I'm going to reissue all the solo material. And at that time, it will be put on all the DSPs, Spotify, Apple Music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there will be another kind of announcement on socials and to our wonderful fan base. There's this other campaign. I'm going to try to have perks and merchandise and the whole, make a whole kind of special event out of it.
Oh, this sounds awesome. I got to tell you, I love Catnip Dynamite.
I got
a copy last year and it hasn't left my CD player in the car since then.
Thank you.
Was the quickening an Art Bell inspired term, or was that just one you thought up on you? Because he'd been talking about that for years, and things have gotten pretty quick lately.
Yes, I certainly was an Art Bell fan, and that whole world, George Norrie. And by the time I tuned into those folks, because obviously they'd been at it for a while, the term the quickening was out and about in a lot of realms, and I just thought it worked. It made a lot of sense. And I touch on a lot of that subject matter in 06, 07, 08. And you're right. Other than the financial crash of 08, I'm really heartbroken by the fact that so much of the stuff that they were talking, which was all labeled conspiratorial, it was all don't go there, we can't go there, you're doing too much drugs. It's all just like You can literally go down the checklist because it's all happening more or less, that way. So, and I'm not happy to report that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there was something to their late night ramblings.
It makes you go, yeah. And they've been, those things that they've been talking about since the 80s, it's
Absolutely.
Like, it wasn't exactly anything new to the internet. It predates the internet a lot.
Yeah, no, I came to that party late. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, I just thought of something real quick. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it might be kind of interesting. Roger, what would you say is your number one biggest regret or something that didn't turn out the way you would have wanted it to about Spilt Milk, the final product?
I don't know. Well, obviously hindsight's 2020. There's always going to be a handful of arrangement ideas or a handful of mixing ideas. I wish this part was a little louder. It gets drowned out by this because we worked, whatever it is. But in general, Andy and I always had a policy, and then everything I've ever attempted to do, it's like, if we can't stand by it 100%, then we have no business releasing it, because as soon as you release it, the sharks are going to come in. This is my favorite song. I hate this one. How come you guys didn't do that? Some critic annihilates you. The public says, we don't like it as much as Belly Button. We're on and on and on and on and on and on. If you take any of that to heart, as good as the compliments feel, the heart, the disappointment from the public, that can feel just as shitty.
The criticism is always more powerful. Always.
Right. Yeah. So Andy and I had to always, be like, man, this works for us. I don't care what our girlfriends, our parents, the record company, if we stand by this, that's what worked for us. And that's often why things took as long as they did. Because if we weren't high-fiving each other and signing off on something, we was back to the drawing board to figure out why. So that's just the way we operated, and that's the way I operate to this day.
Yeah, I ask because to me, it's I can't imagine an album in existence more perfect. And I thought maybe there's something that's imperfect to you, but apparently you were pretty happy with it too. I'm
pretty sure Steely Dan Asia is more perfect.
Yeah, well,
it's in rare company.
That's right.
I just put that out there because that's
right.
Whether it's Night at the Opera or Yes Relayer or 10cc's Deceptive Benz or Steely Dan Asia, there are some out. Thomas Dolby, old Golden Age of Wireless, and there's probably many more I'm forgetting. I'm just in awe of what human beings have achieved in this rock pop micro arena we're talking about. It's
well, that album proves how much you care about perfection. That's for sure.
I still go back to Lamb periodically and have my brain blown out the back of my head. And I have to remind myself that these guys were as old as we were when we made Spilt Milk. They were all mid-20s. They did it with guitar, bass, drums, keys, the same thing every band has. Come on. There's no excuses, people.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, it's a land of pure imagination, right?
Exactly right.
Very much. All right, well, we'll wrap up in just a second. Quick question. Obviously touring isn't going to happen anytime soon, but in the perfect world, we'd love to see you guys play these songs live. And I figure if you were to tour, you'd probably play some Jellyfish and Imperial Drag as well. Are there any particular songs on your short list that you feel like you would have to include in that set list from those older groups, or would just love to play again?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to play all of them in some realm. Especially the Imperial Drag ones are such rockers. They're always such fun to do.
Oh yeah.
Touring Imperial Drag was really gratifying as a keyboard player because I got to pump the clavinet and Wurlitzers through giant amplifiers with guitar effects pedals, and that was part of the sound and goal of that band, and it was fun night after night. I certainly have covered That Is Why live with my friends. That's been fun. And there's certain songs that are more conducive to that with different harmonies and things. So I think you're right. That's something we would enjoy sharing. I'd have to give it some thought of what those optimal moments might be.
Okay. Well, maybe one day that'll happen. Fingers crossed. But...
Yes.
When I was 19, you played a show in Kansas City somewhere with Imperial Drag, and I was faced with having to choose between seeing Steely Dan that night at the big amphitheater or going and watching you guys.
Whoa.
And yeah, what a decision. Turns out I didn't have to make the decision because I didn't realize it wasn't an all ages show, so I couldn't have went to see you anyways. But I was agonizing over that the whole time I'm watching one of my favorite bands going, I can't believe I'm missing Imperial Drag.
Right. And meanwhile, you could see Steely Dan for the next 20 years, but you didn't know.
Still
it
the
then.
only time I've ever seen them.
Right. Oh,
Well,
really?
And
Okay.
much to our surprise, right? Because they didn't tour in the heyday, and then they've toured quite a bit.
Right.
Oh yeah, they came back in '93 and never really let up.
My parents saw them
amazing.
at a tiny club in Topeka, Kansas, where I live, on the tour for their first album. They were just nobodies, you know. They were trying to make it. Just put one album out, and they saw him at that show. I still love hearing that story.
I can't even imagine. I'm from Topeka too, by the way. That's Jake's.
Wow.
Yeah, we both have that wonderful Midwest connection going on.
So you guys have to like the band Kansas. You don't have a choice.
Well, it's something in the water, man. You know, there's just, I think, there's some proggy stuff in the water around those
It's
parts.
a good thing my uncle wasn't in a band that sucked. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
Are a lot of the dregs from that area too? Or are they Florida? I can't remember.
No, they're actually, I'd say Florida, Atlanta. And actually, I've lived down here in Atlanta for the past 20 years or so. I actually bumped into Tim when we went to the screening of Echo in the Canyon. You hear about that movie?
Oh, yeah. I saw it because
it's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. I told Jacob Dylan, I said, this is brought to you by the letter D, because everybody that picks up a guitar in that video plays the D chord the first time they touch a guitar. So
pretty much.
Yeah. So, well, that was wonderful. So, well, Roger, thank you so much for your time. This has been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And remind everybody when the EP is released. It's like next week or something?
Officially, May 15th, officially.
Okay.
And where we're going to, continue the campaign and continue to party for a few months.
Where's the best place to get a copy of the EP at?
I would say the most efficient way is to go to the website and purchase whatever version of there's the download, there's the signed copy, there's the vinyl. There's the vinyl's got all the instrumentals on the B side.
Oh, cool. So you can do karaoke.
Exactly right.
If you dare.
Well, one offer we have is you can buy the isolated tracks, instrumental track, and mix the song and kind of check it out and analyze it, and have a bunch of people submit their own mixes and have a contest.
That's cool.
That's tempting. And remind us the website address again.
TheLickerish
Okay, nice and easy. That's easy to remember. All right, well, thank you. I hope you have a great afternoon, and we'd love to get together with you guys again, maybe about 6 months when you put out number 2, and talk a bit about that if you're up to it.
Fantastic. I really appreciate the time and opportunity to connect with your audience. These worlds overlap probably more than people think, and so thank you again.
Yeah, well, it's all about good music,
Exactly.
And there's lots of overlap there. All right, well, stay safe, and we will be in touch.
You guys see the same sound, everybody. Okay,
it's our pleasure. All right, take care, brother.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
That was fun.
That was awesome.
Yeah. That was all adrenaline. I have no idea what I even just did.
I'll talk to you in a second here.